So, sir, moving on to our next question. What makes Sri Lankan biodiversity unique compared to biodiversities of other countries, sir?
That's also another fantastic question because, as I said earlier, this is a small island right next to India.
Yeah.
In the world, in the global context, there are 34 biodiversity hotspots that has been identified by the conservation community in the world. And the Sri Lanka and the Western Ghats of India collectively considered as one of those 34 biodiversity hotspots in the world. So to become a wildlife hotspot, there are two criteria. One criteria that we can be very proud of, the other criteria that we cannot be proud of. I will tell you the worst story first, right? The one criteria that we are not proud of is that our original natural habitats are already gone. That means 70% of our original natural habitats are already gone, right? That means the habitats that were existed 200-300 years ago is no longer existing. That's the sad part. The good part is basically the native biodiversity. That means the biodiversity that are existing in Sri Lanka, 90% of the biodiversity that are found in Sri Lanka cannot be found anywhere else on the planet. That means it's a higher endemicity can be found in Sri Lanka. So now we have, as Sri Lankans, we have a dilemma. That means most of our original habitats are gone and the existing ones are confined to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
So it's a bad combination, but can't help.
Yeah.
That is why Sri Lanka biodiversity is very, very special. That means Sri Lanka has very high endemicity of the biodiversity. That means the species that are found in Sri Lanka, species means both trees and animals, 90% of them are endemic to Sri Lanka. So that high endemicity is very special.
So, which species or ecosystems do you think are in the most need of protection right now, sir?
Well, every natural habitat, the protection of every natural habitat is important as far as the Sri Lankans are concerned. But I would say that two critical habitats that we need to look at are the lowland rainforests, which is located in the southwestern part of Sri Lanka, and the highland. That means that in the central highlands, there are highland forest patches that need critical, those are called critical habitats that needs protection at any cost. There are two things. One thing is the biodiversity that are existing in these two main habitats cannot be found anywhere else on the planet. And number two, those two habitats are providing so much of watershed for Sri Lanka. We all know that no life can be existed without water, right? So the water is a big part of our existence, our survival, and also our economic progression. So without water, there's no life, there's no industries, there's no civilization, period. Yeah, that's it. So because of that, I think the highland rainforests, that we call it montane rainforests, highland rainforests, and the lowland rainforests are the critical habitat, because only 3 to 4% of such habitats are existing today. So that is why we need to protect those two critical habitats at any cost.
So we can see that you're a hardcore wildlife person, enthusiast. So can you please share some fascinating behavior or fact about a Sri Lankan animal that many people might not know about?
Well, yes, as you said that I'm a hardcore wildlife person. And every animal, every creature that are living around us has a fascinating behavior. That's because that's part of their survival, right? So that makes me going to the field all the time. So that's how it is. I have favorite things. Every behavior is very special to me because that is what I'm enjoying every day. But most of the people would like to see what? Big animals, no? The elephants, leopards, and the bears, that's up. But for me, most of the time, I like the small ones. I will share a few things about the tiny creatures. The jumping spider is the most fascinating creatures that I have been observing and looking at them. And the jumping spiders are very tiny. I mean, just some species are just slightly bigger than grain of rice, right? But they are very colorful. They have 8 eyes, and they have they can map out like a 3D image. Today we are doing it with AI and many other new generation of software. But these tiny creatures that they can actually map out like a 3D image. So they are very fast. They can jump 50 times than its body length. and they don't make any cobwebs or anything, unlike the other spiders. But they are constantly moving around, venomous. Some jumping spiders actually eat other spiders. So because of that, they have different strategies to do the hunting. So that is so fascinating. They're such a tiny creature, and very difficult to observe them unless you are really keen observer and especially looking for these tiny creatures. So the jumping spiders is one of my favorites because they're small. The other one is called tree climbing crab. In Sri Lanka, we have 51 species of freshwater crabs, and 50 of them are living in Sri Lanka. Only 50 out of 51, 50 of them are only in Sri Lanka. So out of that 51 species of crabs, there's one particular crab which is living on the trees, right? They are absolutely colorful. It's reddish and with yellow color on their legs, and they climb trees, and then they live in small water puddles. There are some tree cavities. So they are living in tree cavities. At night, sometimes they come down for hunting. So that's a very special creature that I always fascinating with. The other one is called ornate flying snake. Extremely colorful snake, and that they can glide from tree to tree. They just flatten their body, and then from they're not flying. Even though they call it ornate flying snakes, they are not flying, but they can glide from upper tree to the lower tree by flattening up their body. It's a very colorful snake. That's another creature that I'm very fascinated. And then archerfish. Archerfish is a fish called living in the freshwater habitats. Some of the brackish water habitats also they are living in. What they do is basically they shoot pressurized water column to catch insects that are basically in the foliage above the water.
I see.
So it's absolutely fascinating how they calculate the distance, the speed, and the pressure water. So they have mouth part and their eyes and everything is basically evolved to do their hunting technique. So the archerfish is also one of my favorites. As I said earlier, every bird, every butterfly, every animal, they have developed different types of behaviors. Those are called life strategies actually for their own survival. So every behavior is basically evolved to support their survival, and that actually is a fascination for humans.
So, sir, thank you for those fascinating facts about the Sri Lankan animals. Now, moving on to my next question, which is, how do you envision the future of wildlife conservation of Sri Lanka?
That's a tough question. As I said earlier, 22 million people are there already, and then it's keep multiplying. Land areas are not increasing. I think every citizen must understand the value of the wildlife and the nature around us. That is the only way to do it. And then the comprehensive awareness programs like now the youngsters like you all are getting involved in the conservation, having these conversations on the conversations in terms of wildlife and how protection mechanisms of these things are extremely important. Without that love and caring, nothing can be done. Laws are there, strategies are there, many other things can be done, but the real conservation part will come from the bottom of our hearts. So if you develop that from the young age, and then that is one way of doing it. Number two is to manage the existing habitats.
Yes.
Without expanding too much of our townships, our cities into the natural areas. So that is something that is very challenging, but somehow we need to manage the existing habitats. And then bringing economic benefits from the existing habitats can also create a lot of awareness among us that the nature in fact is bringing us some economic benefits as well. So that is something that some of the other countries are doing. A classic example is Costa Rica. There are a lot of foreign exchanges coming from their conservation and tourism, nature-based tourism businesses. Kenya is another classic example. Rwanda is a classic example, how they are making economic gains from the conservation. So that is, in that context, people will tend to conserve more and then caring more, so that they know that our lives are also, our economic development is also tied to the conservation. Those are the we need to tie up all these things together if you are really looking at the long-term conservation of natural heritage of Sri Lanka.
Yes, sir. Now, as someone who's a wildlife biologist who is also tied to the tourism industry, what role does ecotourism play in wildlife preservation and how can it be improved?
Well, that's a big part that we need to look at Sri Lanka, because we are an island and we have so much wildlife and nature is here in Sri Lanka. And then how do we market it and how do we manage it is challenging. But at the same time, if you do it well, and then the ecotourism is one of the key components that which we can bring some economic revenue to the country. For that, of course, we need to look at what are the areas that we can market to the outside world. Classic example is the elephants. Elephant is the Asian elephant. 10% of the Asian elephants are confined to the small island of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
If you go out of Colombo, 2 hours drive from any part of the dry zone, you are in the elephant country.
Yeah.
So elephant weaving is one of the key areas that we can look at it. Leopard is also very difficult to see any other countries in the world, but Sri Lanka is not so difficult. And then the bird life and other tiny creatures, trekking, many things that you can do it. The way that you have to do it, number one, you have to conserve the resources what we have, and then you manage it very scientifically so that the economic benefits will be greater than destructions of those resources. So for that, of course, the communities has to get involved. The think tanks that can bring new avenues, new businesses in that context is critically needed if you're really looking at the ecotourism expansion in this country.
I see, sir. Now, moving on to our next question, which is, are there any projects or are there any research that you are looking forward to, sir?
Well, I'm planning for a very exciting project, but I don't know how feasible it is. I'm planning to drop maybe 5 to 6 old rail carriages into the ocean to build a reef. These are called artificial reefs. In other countries, they're doing it. In Sri Lanka, we have not done it here in Sri Lanka yet. And then I'm thinking about it with the support of my company. And so it's in the final stage of planning. And hopefully before mid-2025, I should be able to drop that thing into. It's a very research-based and it's a very innovative way of building a coral reef and creating a sort of a habitat for many fish species to come and thrive. And also this kind of initiative is also can be used for scuba divers. As I said earlier, I'm a diver and I love oceans. I love go to these kind of places. I love shipwreck diving. So this can be used as a diving location as well. I'm very excited about it, and the rainforest, smaller rainforest patch that we are involved in restoring, and that is progressing extremely well. And then a lot of youngsters come and do some small studies there, and I'm happy to help them. And then a lot of volunteer work is involved in that project by doing some tree planting and learning things. And so these are the things that are on the table. So maybe next 2 to 3 years, if I can achieve these 2-3 things, I'll be very happy.
Well, we would like to wish you the best of luck with all of your projects. Now, for the last question of today's episode, is there any advice that you would like to give to any young aspiring biologists listening out there?
Well, number one, if you want to become a biologist, if you want to become a real wildlife person, only thing that you have to develop is the love of nature. That's all. Right? If you have the love of nature, if it's coming from the bottom of your heart genuinely, and you can develop a passion. So if you become passionate about your nature that around you, you don't have to go to the national park, you don't have to go to the protected area, you don't have to go across the oceans to another country to see it, but you can observe and learn and develop that passion from your backyard onwards.
Yes.
In Sri Lanka that is something that is very special. Even heart of Colombo, it's so green and so many things to see and learn. Even the jumping spiders that I was talking about, you go to any garden in Colombo, you will find 2 to 3 species of jumping spiders.
Yes,
so all what you have to do is basically develop a keen eyes to observe, develop a love of it, develop a passion of it, And then you can go to the universities and go to the higher studies and learn about the science of it. And here you can become a wildlife person, wildlife scientist, veterinary, any person that can get involved, become ecologist, botanist, and then you will get engaged in conservation in any part of the world. So that's the advice that which I can give it to the youngsters. All what you have to do is to develop a love of nature around you.
Yes, I completely agree with you, sir. Now, before we wrap up, where can our listeners find out more about your work or follow your initiatives, sir?
Well, I think, I'm attached to the Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts as a business arm called Nature Trails. And then you go to the website and then check that. And then Cinnamon Sustainability Initiatives, you might be able to get my work and then get to know about it, and then maybe can contribute your valuable time for that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and insights today. It's been truly inspiring to hear about your passion for preserving Sri Lanka's unique wildlife. But with that, we have officially come to the end of the second episode of Globe Talks 24. So thank you to all the listeners for tuning in today, and we hope to see you all on the next episode of Globe Talks 24. Make sure to follow us to stay updated. Have a great day.